Hey guys, Coach here, and welcome to this week's podcast. This week we are going to talk about form versus function in our landscape, and is one of those topics that really hits homeowners right smack dab in the wallet, and eventually, if not thought out and done correctly, the frustration department. In my experience as a designer and contractor, I have seen people naturally gravitate towards pretty landscaping first. You know, the flowers, the patios, lighting, pretty blooming ornamental thingies and ornamental trees. Basically the social media side of landscape. The Pinterest style inspiration shots is what everybody wants. But if the foundational function of the property is ignored, the beauty often becomes very temporary. You know, I hope in this episode, I kind of present the perfect opportunity to blend practical wisdom with, wait for it, real world homeowner mistakes, and explain why successful landscapes need both form and function working together. Hey, I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. Hey guys, Coach here. Don't forget, you can be inspired, but you must be informed in order to do a very good DIY landscape project. YourYardCoach.com. You know, many years ago, I was so blessed to be mentored in the horticultural world by a man named J.C. Burns. I'm sure he's passed on now, but man, you know, God kind of puts you in a position where you can learn from some great people, and he was definitely one of them. And one of the things that he taught me as I was a budding nurseryman and landscape designer, he said, Matt, the best landscapes don't just look good, they work good. And I don't know why, but those words just kind of resonate with me for the last 45 years or more. You know, when you have something that really looks nice, but on January 23rd, when you have 3 feet of snow, or on July 17th, when you have an absolute deluge, the landscape performs for you and it works for you. Despite all the pretties and all the niceties, the framework of that landscape is the one that pulls you through. You know, I remember at the kitchen table sometime that when I spoke to folks, and you can kind of pick up on when people think they know something and they try to talk above their pay grade, and they just kind of come off as, I don't want to say fakes. I want to say people that don't want to look stupid. Oftentimes, people would talk, and what they really were trying to convey is they wanted a landscape from a designer that photographs well, that looks good. And by the time I left that kitchen table, I conveyed that yes, we can bring that part of your world alive, but as we do it, I want to have a landscape that survives weather, survives drainage, and maintenance the maintenance level that you want, the budget that you've kind of hinted around. It stands up to your pets and maybe your kids, and snow and navigation around the yard, aging of not only the landscape itself, but also the people at the home that live there and have to take care of things. And something that we have absolutely no control over whatsoever, time. How's that landscape going to stand up to time? So I would always approach a landscape from the function side first. And when I say that, it's things that I have discussed here many times before. How about drainage? Infrastructure, as far as irrigation, as far as retaining wall, as far as planning an approach to a construction project rather than just jumping out there next week because I had an opening in my schedule and I just start going like a whirlwind. You know, and then addressing from the designer's aspect and the customer's point of view, solving problems for that homeowner. Maybe there's something on the property that is problematic and it needs to be solved, but solved in such a manner that it will look good, function good, and stand up against the test of time. And so what I'm trying to say is DIYers oftentimes make emotional landscape decisions instead of strategic landscape decisions. So let's take a look at a couple of things. Let me ask you a question, or a few questions. Why do so many beautiful landscapes fail after a few years? And I'm going to give you an example. And I do not put myself above anyone else. I just have just a little bit more experience. And I tend to have brought that J.C. Burns mentality to my designing and my approach to landscaping in general. And that is that I had a couple of competitors. They were good guys, they really were. And they were more successful than me. I was kind of out of the 20 or so in my region of Northern California, within a 2-county radius, there was probably 20 of us. And I was probably smack dab in the middle, maybe the upper third of business-wise. But these two guys that I want to bring my attention to is they were really, really good at what they did up to the point of when they planted. And when they planted for satisfaction and visual wow instead of what was this landscape going to look like 5 and 10 years down the road. So they went for the please the customers' emotions and the neighborhood's, oh, wow, look at that new yard, look. That is why they were very successful. However, I found myself, after many years of being in business, that I would go back to these homes, oftentimes with new homeowners there, and they wanted to redo the landscape because what was there has been overgrown, has failed, has run its course as far as a perennial, has not worked out the way I bet that my competitors originally put it in for. Because, especially in California, you had basically on a workmanship, craftsmanship level, there were laws in place that you had to kind of guarantee things for a minimum of 4 years. So you had to, not necessarily plants, but certainly hardscape like patios, concrete, retaining walls, irrigation, lighting, those types of things. But the plants were kind of a get out of jail free card. You didn't have to worry so much about plants. And these guys would just pack a freaking yard, just pack it full. And then within the first 6 months, when these colors and ground covers and perennials burst to life and everything was, man, I bet you their phone rang off the hook. But 2, 3 to 5 years, all of a sudden everything was all overgrown. Now these guys also had a maintenance division. And guess what they would do? They would go in and landscape a yard, discount the landscaping job if the customer signed up for the weekly maintenance or monthly maintenance. And so they would come back in and take care of the overplanted landscape that they had put in a few years ago. And oftentimes that required pulling a few things out and trimming a few things back, way back in some cases. So that is why a real pretty Pinterest shot landscape doesn't always work on the long term. So my approach to it was always this, and it still is today. A landscape has to function before it can truly perform as beauty or as form. And it's something that you really need to take away from this podcast today, because man, if you really beautify that corner in your backyard, but every time it rains heavy, that corner in your backyard floods, and you always seem to struggle with what you planted back there, the function wasn't addressed before the form. So It looks nice when you first put it in. It was beautiful. You had a nice yard party or a birthday party there. And then all of a sudden the heavens opened up one night. You got 2 inches of rain and you got 6 inches of water flooding the backyard because drainage wasn't addressed when you put in the pretties. So many times, I'm sure many times, I don't speak from personal, no, I do. I do speak from professional experience. Instagram and Pinterest landscapes don't always show the flooded basement. The flooded basement because no weeping tiles or anything were put around, and the hillside behind there, every time it thaws in the springtime, water migrates down the hill and just goes right through that foundation. And that's why you have a sump pump that's literally running 24/7 in the springtime, because those things were not addressed. These photo shots don't show dead arborvitaes that were planted in a very, very wet corner that floods out all the time. A cracked patio that was installed by Joe with Chuck in his truck one Saturday morning with a pull-behind concrete pad, but they didn't bother to grade it out very well, finish it very well, or put any sort of reinforcement in it. And 6 months later, all of a sudden, their lousy substrate has shifted, cracked the patio, and they're nowhere to be found. Or with their beautiful Pinterest shot thing, how much maintenance is this pretty landscape going to take? Do you have the time? Do you have the skill set? Or did you need a landscape that was a lot more functional than form, at least for the stage of life that you're in? If you're a business owner or a tech guru or someone who's pulling down 60 hours a week to help the company forge ahead because you can see a future there, that doesn't give you a whole heck of a lot of time to be out there mowing all day on a Saturday, because the first half of Saturday you were in the office. The second half of Saturday you had Little League with the kids. Sunday was in church, and boom, all of a sudden it's time to go back to work. So how does that landscape serve your needs and your lifestyle? So let's drill down just a little bit further. Let's talk about the definition of form. Form is basically curb appeal in a can. That's what it is. Just pop the top on that curb appeal can, and that's the form that everybody sees. That's the Home Depot, Lowe's, mom and pop nursery on a Saturday morning right around 11 o'clock in April, May, and June. That's the form that everybody's chasing right there. But if you go inside another department at the box store or somewhere at a hardware store or anywhere else, how many people are picking up, corrugated drain lines and adapters to downspouts? How many people are picking up the rebar? How many are picking up the bedding sand and the 3/4 inch clean gravel and other stuff to put in the infrastructure that's going to help preserve the pretty long term? Curb appeal in a can. Form is also all the colors. Our pansies, our petunias, our marigolds, all the impatiens on the north side and the shady side, the containers of color, and everything looks really good. The textures, the plant choice, the outdoor living aesthetics, the lighting ambiance, the focal points. The wow factor is what people chase. And like I said before, form is an emotional thing. It creates feelings. As a designer, I always asked folks, what do you want to get from this landscape that we're going to do? And they'd say, we want it to escape into our backyard. We want to be able to go back there and lower our shoulders down and have something nice to look at. Okay? So there's the form emotion coming out in a customer. We want it to feel intimate, cozy. We want it to look luxurious or maybe natural. We want a modern vibe from our landscape, a peaceful retreat. These are all adjectives that I've heard over the decades of what people want from that. So as a contractor and a designer, I really learned early on that people buy landscapes emotionally first. Emotionally, when they're sold the form, they're sold the cozy and the luxury. But behind the curtain, just like in The Wizard of Oz, don't pay attention to that guy behind the curtain. The contractor side of me said, I can give them the form, but I got to put the function in as well. And I never really talked too much about function. That was my job as a contractor, to make sure that whatever form I built in for these folks, the function was under the ground and working all the time for them. So switch gears. Let's talk about function. So as many videos and podcasts, they basically boil down to, I don't know, almost like a dozen things. And let's go through them real quick. Ad nauseum, I have talked about drainage. Drainage is the number one thing that anybody can do to a landscape as a DIYer, is to address, problem solve if necessary, install, and direct drainage in their landscape so that whatever they put in, it will survive, because it will not get washed away, it will not get flooded out, it will not threaten a neighbor's home or anything else. So drainage. We talk about grading and slope. How is the dwelling on that property graded and sloped? Here at Brook and Pond, whoever graded the yard, it was probably the most important thing done here, because we get quite a bit of snow and we get quite a bit of rain. And I would not want to have a tabletop type of landscape here. We have a good 2% plus slope away from our house, and then it really drops out towards the front lawn and everything. We probably have a close to a 4 foot drop, and then down to the creek and the pond, and we're really kind of up on a knoll, so to speak. But grading and slope is something that you have to address. Irrigation, if necessary. For those of my brothers and sisters out west, you know what I speak of. Some people back here east of the Mississippi have it, for sure. I probably could not get in a plane and fly around the northern part of the county that I'm in and find but one, soon to be two at Brook and Pond, but only one place that has an irrigation system for turf. Everything else just relies on whatever falls from the sky, which is fine to a point. But here up in northern Maine, we have a 6-week drought period every year as a rule. From right about the first or second week of August all the way through the month of August into September and almost touching October, we really don't have hardly any rain. We have beautiful weather, but hardly any rain at all. And that's where everybody's lawns get all crispy and they get all ugly and dried out. And the weeds that can hang in there start to take over. So irrigation can be important here. It's supplemental irrigation. Maybe you don't need it, but 6 or 8 weeks out of the year, but you got it. So another thing is traffic flow. And I'm not talking about cars, I'm talking about people. If I'm speaking to a homeowner right now that has your standard 1/4 acre lot, and you have to go out your back door and step off into dirt, or you have to go to the side of the house to take the garbage out and you step off into dirt, then you don't have a good traffic flow pattern. And a good, safe, durable surface is a very, very appealing thing to a residential home. The ability to walk all the way around, front yard to backyard, circumnavigate your house on a nice, safe, flat, non-slip, durable surface. Part of the function. How about the ability to manage snow? I am now what I consider something of a snow management expert after 3 hard years of learning fast. You can put certain things up, and we're going to share a project with you in the video, so join us over there as well. Part of adding to the function of brook and pond here, but part of it is, okay, if I do this project, how am I still going to be able to manage the snow in the winter in this area? Because things are going to get a little bit tighter in one respect and much more organized in another respect. How about the function of privacy? Do you need some privacy? I know in Homescape 2.0, I share a story of the fishbowl house. The fishbowl house was a house that I was called to by a family that had the only single-story ranch home in the whole, I'd say 50 houses. And on either side of them was a 2-story monster and a cul-de-sac backed up to their back fence where they had 3 2-story monsters back there. And they were the only so all the upper floors of these 5 other houses looked down on them and they said, what can we do? Because we feel like we live in a fishbowl when we go out into the backyard. One of my more challenging landscape aspects. I approached it with truthfulness, a little bit of creativity, and it turned out okay. Was it perfect? No, I could not wipe all the prying eyes out of there. I just had to tell them this is what we can do, and they were more than happy with that. Funny thing is, though, they sold the house inside 5 years. How about maintenance requirements? Hey, I saw on page such and such a Sunset magazine, or I was death scrolling through Pinterest the other day looking for ideas, and lo and behold, I came across this beautiful landscape. However, once again, the emotional side gets kicked in, the functional side gets kicked out. How much time does it require to maintain it to the level of the photo that you're looking at? How about we go to the nursery and start checking tags for this one? Plant survivability. Now, I am a customer of one of the big box stores. I really have no choice. It's the only box store in the whole county when it comes to nursery plants and garden center type of thing. But this box store is notorious for bringing in plant material that will not survive our winters here. I see zone 6, 7, 5 for zone 4 where we're at. And I'm just going, now, could you make it survive? Yes. You put it in a container and you put it in indoor protection. Most likely it's a deciduous plant and it can handle going into, like I have done, you put things in the garage for the wintertime. I do not heat my garage, but my garage is, as a whole, even at 28 degrees below zero, which was our coldest night this past winter, the garage only got down to 20. So that's basically US zone 7, something like that, maybe 8. And most of the plant material was rated for right around there. So I was good. And those plants are now back outside and they're doing well. But make sure you check the plant survivability before you go plunking your credit card down and putting things because they looked pretty. Will they survive where you're at? Sun and shade realities. How about where the house sits? What faces where? Is your backyard a sweltering boiling pot in the summer? Or is your backyard facing north and it can be kind of cool because you have some big evergreens there and you only a few days out of the year it's really comfortable? Know your sun and shade realities and where the shade shadows hit at what time of year and when, so that when you do plant stuff, it's going to get the right amount of sun versus shade. A big one is erosion control, especially if you have hillsides and stuff. I have covered on a few occasions greenscape hillside management, where you can erosion control through plant material. We've talked about retaining walls. A lot of these things aren't part of the form until you plant them up, but the function is put in there, then you add the pretty. So erosion control. And that can also dovetail in with drainage as well. Depending on the type of plants that you may already have versus the ones that you're going to get, do they fit the space that you're going to put in, they are going to be put into? Are the root systems going to heave driveways or walkways or underrun fence and go off into neighbors' yards? That's part of the, not just plant survivability, but root space for plants. Otherwise, you're kind of going to, there's only so much nutrient in the ground. And unless you're constantly adding to it, the plant is going to do what the plant has to do to survive. And if that means run underneath a walkway to hit the lawn to find water and nutrients, that's what it's going to do. It's just designed that way. Okay, the last two are accessibility and durability. Durability is time. If you hire somebody to do this or you do it yourself, you want to do it right the first time. You want it to be durable. You want it to look nice, and you want it to be functional, and you want it to have pretties. But will it stand the test of time? Is this your forever house? You have to design your landscape in accordance to, you're going to be there 30 years from now, not 5. Designing a landscape for 5 years or less, and you're going to bounce, then don't throw the Taj Mahal into it. Hold some of those resources back. Make it look very nice and functional and livable, but you don't have to put all the gooch to it until you get to that forever house. And accessibility. Accessibility is something like, is there a handicap in the house? Do you plan on having a harvestable space in the backyard or the front yard, but mostly the backyard? And when I say that, I mean like a weekend warrior orchard or a vegetable garden, and you don't have to walk across the lawn to get to it. You have a pathway deliberately created in order to navigate your way there and get your things. If you're going to have a hot tub and you're going to plan on using that hot tub, you've placed it in such a manner that you have easy access to it, and you've created the surroundings around it there you don't have the second-story homes looking down on you while you're taking your hot tub. Plain and simple. Accessibility and privacy almost go hand in hand in a case such as that. So a key point to take away from all this is function. I don't know, how do I say it? Function's kind of the invisible backbone of a great landscape. And if you treat it that way, you know darn well that it's going to stand up to time and aesthetically pleasing to the eye, etc. And one of the things that I used to pride myself on, and that is that most of the functional work is hidden underground or even unnoticed, absolutely unnoticed, until if it was not put in or it was not put in correctly, it fails. We don't want that. We don't want the pretty designer landscape to implode because the irrigation line trenches weren't compacted correctly and they imploded in the first 3 months because of heavy rains. And now you've got these troughs running through your backyard that you need to rip up turf or rip up plants and recompact things and replant things. Okay, so let's talk about some homeowner mistakes that I've seen, that I know about, and that I have read about. And we're talking about first about homeowners prioritizing the form first. And this comes in the form of, say, like a beautiful colored and stamped back patio, but the downspouts that are in the backyard dump right onto the patio. That would be a classic example of form over function, when it could be easily remedied with a drainage line that could have been connected to these two downspouts, run underneath the patio and out to an area where those downspouts could discharge water without the heavy duty creek and running water and algae and mold and other things that come onto concrete when the downspouts dump onto a durable surface. Think just a little bit ahead before that beautiful, very expensive patio goes in. Another thing would be the plants over the soil conditions. You always wanted to have plant X in the house that you were going to live in as an adult. You loved it. Grandma had one. They're beautiful. And you find them at the nursery and you buy 6 of them because, oh my God, I've got my own home. I'm going to have those plants that I've always loved. I've always admired. However, the soil that you have at your beautiful dream home now isn't conducive to growing your plant unless you really amend and change the soil conditions. It's just a death sentence to your dream plant. So, know what kind of soil you have, what needs to be corrected in order to accommodate your dream plant or your dream landscape. Another one would be, and I don't think I'm whipping a dead horse here, the aesthetics side of a landscape. Maybe some of the garden whimsy and other aspects of it, but you've created a maintenance nightmare for yourself that you just don't have the time to put to it. Maintenance realities is just that. It's a reality. And if you don't pay attention, as maybe your spouse goes, oh, we need more of these. This is pretty. I want more. Did you see this plant? And all of a sudden, you have hundreds of plants in your yard. And oh my gosh, yes, they look fantastic. But those 30 that they got there last year have now doubled in size, and they need deadheading all the time. Otherwise, they bloom for about 3 weeks and they're a giant green mess. And oh my God, that perennial, no one told me that it spreads by underground rhizomes, and now I'm having to take it out 6 feet away from the original plant. So, maintenance realities are something that you have to consider before you leap off into the form part of this. Another example would be planting privacy hedges on, let's say, the eave side of the building, and you got your privacy, but every year, since you live in a snow zone that generally accumulates upwards of 60 inches of snow over the course of a winter, and you're having to dig these privacy hedges out or wrap them every winter to protect them from the snow load slide off the eave side of your house, maybe there could have been a little bit more thinking on that side of the house, and maybe the privacy could have come from a different means or a plant that could stand up to snow load. Here at Brook and Pond, the eave side of the garage has 2 beds, and they are filled with dwarf arborvitae, cool splash durvilla, and I think it's opening day viburnum. But they're shrubby perennials that stand up to snow load, and they're literally buried every winter, buried under 3 and 4 feet of snow. And then come springtime and everything melts out, their durvilla is kind of just flat to the ground from all the weight. Even the dwarf arborvitae, they're smushed to one side. They've been pushed over. And same with the viburnum, but they just spring right back. So it took a little bit of searching and seeking to find something that would stand up to it. And the other side of the garage has some hydrangeas, arborescent hydrangeas, and they just die down to the ground anyway, so there's not that much of a deal. For the house in the back, the triangle boulder bed is probably 10 or 12 feet away from the eaves, and that's where I go through with the tractor or the walk-behind snowblower, and that bed gets filled up with snow. And the back patio, the gravel patio, stays relatively clear. And in the front patio, we just shovel that off. And then there's parking out front. So you have to really choose your plant material and be aware of if you're living in a snow zone. You don't want to put something that's emerald arborvitae-like that tends to separate, or you have Italian cypress that tends to separate in windy areas. So either wrap them up in the winter really tight so that snow doesn't bust them up, or you're going to end up with increased maintenance issues and destroyed plants. Plain and simple. Here's a saying I saw not too long ago. One that, yes, I subscribe to a certain point. Maybe 30% of me subscribed to this to a certain point, but the rest of me, not so much. And it kind of harkens back to the beginning of the show where I said my competitors. And that is, the landscape industry often sells dreams before discussing functional consequences. Let me say that again. The landscape industry often sells dreams before discussing functional consequences. There is a very good channel on YouTube that I watch occasionally. And this guy runs I'm not going to say just a landscape company. He's more of a outdoor living type of construction company. There are oftentimes pools and covered patios and just basically dream yards that this guy does. And I often look in great detail as the video progresses, and I see sometimes, not always, but sometimes I see the old downspout coming down on the brand new, very expensive paver patio. And how was the grade and slope and everything else addressed in this? I don't see drain boxes going in super large patios. Where's the water supposed to go? So I assume that the grade and everything has been addressed, but it doesn't really address it in the video. It's never mentioned in the video. It's one of those things like the guy behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz. The functional part of a landscape isn't the one that gets thrown out into the video. It's the time-lapse process that people get drawn into seeing, and then the beauty at the end. But from someone like myself who looks for things beyond that is, well, where's this and where's that? And how does this work? And so I look for the function and then admire the form. So let's wrap this thing up. How about let's talk on a final note of how function actually creates better form. If you have the soil problems addressed, you have imported lots of amendment, you have a lot of starter fertilizers and other organic amendments that have really changed the viability of the soil of the home that you have. Don't you think that healthier plants are naturally going to look better, and you're not going to be banging your head against the horticultural wall wondering, why won't this plant grow? How about that beautiful, beautiful turf lawn that you put in? That sod lawn. God, it looks good. You've got it beautifully edged. You love how the mower wheels and the direction you go on. Man, it makes it look like a ballpark out there every Saturday when you get all done. But dang it, when the heavens open up, that lawn tends to migrate uphill in the backyard, and all the water from watering and rain migrates down, and you get this flooding right at your back walkway every time it rains a lot. So the grading really wasn't addressed in all of this, only the beautiful side of the lawn. Another function over form is smart spacing. Smart spacing. The right plant in the right place for the right reason, and spaced accordingly so that when they grow up 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, they are not damaging foundations, walkways, driveways. You can actually mow the lawn without feeling like you've been on a bucking bronco ride because the root heaves and everything that are there. Think about it. The functional side of hillside retention. I think one of the most beautiful type of landscapes is where you take the tapestry of a well thought out hillside and you retain it correctly, both through hardscape elements, block retaining wall, cement retaining wall, railroad tie retaining wall, wood retaining wall with dead man and everything else put into it. And then it is stair-stepped and crisscrossed and planted up. And then you take all that, you've created a landscape tapestry that literally is not flat, but actually tilted right to your point of view from anywhere in the back part of your yard or the front part of your yard. And you walk out there, it's bam, it's right in your face. It's not like you're looking down a flat table of a landscape. It's actually tilted. But you went through and you thought about the function of it so that when things open up and you have snow and rain and God forbid, hurricane amounts of rain, that there's been some drainage and other things put into there, that water is captured and evacuated and pumped or whatever away from the area so it remains durable and long lasting. So good function basically improves good form in the long term. It really does. Boom. Need I say more? So if you're sitting down, if you haven't visited the website or anything, you haven't decided to invest into Homescape 2.0 or Landscaping Simplified book that kind of teaches you all this on a step-by-step basis, keep in mind this. If you don't take anything away from anything here today, keep this in mind. A good landscape should be designed for year 5 or 10 and not week 5 or 10. Say it one more time. A good landscape should be designed for year 5 or 10 and not week 5 or 10. And so much of the landscape industry is, we're going to get in here, we're going to do a good job, we're going to give them the wow factor, and then we're going to be gone. And in the next 5 to 10 weeks, when this thing all settles out and things start popping and blooming and looking, and everyone's going, oh my God, look at the Smith's house. But in year 5, those beautiful little pretties that look so well, now they're an overgrown monster because it's not the right plants. The perennials have died out because now they're getting shaded by the bigger shrubs. So think about the functional design behind what you're going to do. Plain and simple. Okay, a couple final takeaways. Really super down to earth saying that I found, and I wanted to share it with you, is that a great landscape should make life easier, not just prettier. That's a good sign of a well-done landscape. That old adage of beauty gets attention, it sure does, but function earns longevity is the approach that you should kind of take in any landscape project that you're going to do. So, let's summarize. Don't landscape according to Pinterest expectations. Understand some of the DIY mistakes that you've heard here today and just kind of go, oh yeah, coach told me about that. I want to make sure I do this so that when I put this in there, that is going to help this succeed. All of this boils down to a whole lot of practical, commonsensical property home ownership. And it's nobody's responsibility except you and whoever else owns that home. Did you get something from it? I hope you did. Hey, jump on over to YouTube. Check this out with obviously a lot more pictorial aspects of it. And if you like the YouTube channel, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to jump on over to yardcoach.com, we do offer some goods and services there that'll help you out to do this exact thing. I'm always here for you on consulting and certainly by email. I appreciate your time very, very much. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one. I'll say goodbye for now, and as always, to your landscape success.